First, I do have to appreciate the fact that my last three main videos on my channel are on Megalopolis, Joker 2, and now The Apprentice. I mean, what a run we're on, right, everyone? You know, the movies are so back. You know, I gotta admit, I didn't think I'd be saying the words, I saw The Apprentice. I mean, who in their right mind would greenlight a movie like this considering literally everything? A Donald Trump biopic is something that I just don't really know who would want that. People who hate Trump certainly don't want that, and I don't even think the people who love Trump want this either. And then begs the question, who in their right mind would accept the offer to play Donald Trump? But here we are. And after a lengthy back and forth of legal action like cease and desist from Donald Trump's team, producers vetoing deals for distribution, The Apprentice is here to audiences before the 2024 election here in the US. I legitimately had no idea what to expect, and somehow, some way, it's better than I thought it was going to be. The fact that this movie isn't a complete fucking disaster is a miracle in its own. This genuinely could have been the worst movie of the year. Whether it was going to be a bad SNL impression, 2 hours of just the middle finger, or someone putting him up on a pedestal. I mean, there are so many different ways this could have gone wrong. And I'll say this, for a subject as charged as Donald Trump, I really don't know what you're going to think about this. And I know a lot of people are going to go into this movie already feeling a certain way. That's human nature. I can't change that, and my review definitely isn't going to change your mind. What I will say is, as a movie, this actually works. You get a deeper insight into Donald Trump. And before you roll your eyes and close out the video, just hear me out for a second. Considering my age, the Donald Trump we see in this movie is not the one that I'm too familiar with. I'm familiar with the president, Donald Trump. I'm familiar with his debates and his rallies. That's the one that I know the most. But the one in the film here is a younger Donald Trump, still kind of finding his way in this real estate business world, just really trying to make a name for himself. And the movie spans years, decades even, and the Trump that you see in the beginning and the Trump you see at the end are not exactly the same. And that change is largely sparked by Roy Cohn, played by Jeremy Strong. He's a ruthless, no-nonsense lawyer willing to do anything to win, and he shares with him his rules to make it. And I'll simplify those here. 1. Attack. 2. Deny everything and admit nothing. 3. Claim victory and never admit defeat. Honestly, those are the rules that I used when I used to play Call of Duty, but yeah, fair enough. And that becomes the thesis for Trump and the rest of the movie. Now, the reason I think this movie works as well as it does is not just because it's a character study on Donald Trump and who he is, but just as much as it is that, it is also a study on capitalism, on power, on wealth, and how easily one can be influenced by that when you're a young, ambitious person. If you removed the name Trump and you made this a fictional story, you replaced the character, it doesn't look like him, it doesn't sound like him, this movie works all the same. You can see in the beginning how Trump looks at other wealthy businessmen. You can hear him gush about it to a random woman he's with. And while we know what's going to happen, that is very reflective of that world. It's a world of wanting to trade places with someone. You always want to be on top. I'm not going to make a joke about that. And even when I was in business school and college, I mean, you felt that energy certainly from a lot of people. It can be a world where you have to step on people to get what you want. And it uses the character of Donald Trump as a vessel to really drive that point home. And I think that's what's different about this movie versus just a normal biopic about Trump. It shows how many breaks he got through his connections with his rich friends, how you can see the entitlement and the ambitiousness in him grow as the movie progresses, and how it can turn you into somebody that maybe you weren't even just a few years ago, or speed up the process on who you were going to be anyways. And some have said this movie doesn't go hard enough at Trump. I will leave that for you to decide. I do think it could have used more bite. I mean, you're making a controversial movie anyway. You might as well swing for it, but I think it does an adequate enough job, but you know, you decide. And the cinematography of the movie adds to that experience as well. It's kind of shot like a 70s show for certain portions of it, the handheld feel, the film grain, even the aspect ratio. It really makes you feel like you're watching something that was recorded in real time back in the day versus a very clean digital look. But we can't talk about a Donald Trump movie without talking about the performances. Sebastian Stan plays Donald Trump, and I would have loved to have been in the room when Marvel had found out that Sebastian Stan was playing Trump. I mean, Kevin Feige must have fell to his knees. But with this movie and A Different Man, which is another great movie, Sebastian Stan has quickly turned into one of the more interesting actors. I'll be the first to admit I never saw this coming, you know, seeing The Winter Soldier. But it seems like his career is a cycle of get the MCU bag, do a bunch of indie movies where he plays very different and challenging characters, and then repeat, which I respect. And his performance in this, it works. somehow it works. In the beginning, I'll admit it took me a little bit to get accustomed to that just because he is playing younger and he's not over exaggerating his voice either. There are so many good impressions of Trump out there, a lot of which sound exactly like Trump and sound more like Trump than Sebastian Stan. But you have to remember that most of those are usually for comedy bits or just stand-up specials. If I had to endure that for a 2-hour movie that it takes itself pretty seriously, I would jump out the window. So while he never really goes for it with the sound of his voice, it's smart because then he doesn't become at risk of being an SNL impression or just a caricature of Donald Trump. But when I tell you he gets the cadence down, he gets the mannerisms down, even the way his lips like purse up, I mean, he knocks it all out of the park, really. And his mannerisms become more apparent as the movie goes on, as Donald Trump gets older. Because by the end of the film, it's a pretty damn good job, and I think you're convinced. Somehow, he comes out of this looking good, which is crazy. And Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn, I thought was great too. I didn't have any prior knowledge of Roy Cohn, so when he first showed up on screen and started talking, I'm like, bro, who is this Looney Tunes ass villain with his voice and everything? But again, by the end, you're just convinced. He really plays the line well between absolute savage scumbag and then also kind of feeling used and thrown away at the end as well. And Maria Bakalova, who doesn't have a ton of screen time, but she is just a great presence in it. Honestly, just very good casting. Now, this isn't a perfect movie, obviously. I will say there's a limit to how much you can actually enjoy this movie. Because of the subject, because of the themes, and how obvious it is from the beginning, it hits a ceiling pretty fast. Because even though the movie is pretty thoroughly entertaining throughout, outside of one particularly upsetting scene, that's really all it kind of does. It doesn't really try to do more than that, which again, I would have loved to see another swing. But because of that, I felt like the movie didn't fully know where to go, especially in that third act. It was more a repeat of the cycle that we saw, just with Donald Trump being older now. And ultimately, I don't think this movie has a capital G great moment in it. It's funny at times, it's upsetting at other times, and it is entertaining, as I said, but it kind of stops there, which is fine. But I can't really imagine anyone thinking this is one of the best movies of the year. Overall, I think this movie is strongest when it's exploring those themes mentioned, and weakest when it feels like it's winking at the audience about what is to come with Donald Trump. Go out and see it for yourself if you want, or don't. It's really that simple. Let's all try to be normal about this, please. The Apprentice, 3.5 stars. I can't believe that this movie is better than Joker 2. I really can't believe it.